All right, guys, it is the 12 o'clock hour. I would like to start off by saying welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have a very, very packed agenda, so we are going to get started. I just want to, again, welcome you to this wonderful space that we have curated for you. And we certainly hope that what we've provided for you is going to be full of information and give you some of the things that you need in order to get your vision off the ground. I am Jennifer Brown. I'm the Community Relations Manager, and I will serve as your MC for this afternoon. Joy Currey, our founder and CEO, is with us. Our director is with us this afternoon. And Janvika Shaw is our marketing manager at CORRAL, and she's serving as our admin, and she will support any questions that we have rolling in through the comments today. So again, thank you for being with us. So I wanted to start off by just giving you a couple logistics and a couple housekeeping items. Please make sure to keep yourself on mute while we are on today's webinar. We will record the session. The recording has already started, and we will send out that recording to everyone that has registered today. So I want to give you a kind of a breakdown of what to expect today. The first 5 to 10 minutes, we'll give you a little bit of CORRAL's backstory, and then we're going to dive into some of the questions that were submitted to us ahead of time. If you didn't get a chance to submit a question, we will have some time at the end to do a live Q&A, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. But if we don't get a chance to answer your question while we are in this space, we plan on creating a booklet that's going to have your questions and your answers, and we'll send that out to you at a later time as well, so that you can have all of that information right handy for you. So then, as I mentioned, the second half of this session, we're going to go into a live Q&A, and that's going to be really fun because you're going to get a chance to ask questions right off the bat that come to mind. So we're going to ask you to raise your hand using the raise hand icon in the Zoom reactions tab. So then I'll acknowledge you. I'll ask you to take yourself off of mute, and you can go ahead and ask your question, and Joy will answer that question to the best of her ability. And then finally, we have some really exciting news that we want to share with you about CORRAL that's coming up this spring. So we'll dive into that a little bit later, and we'll take about 10 minutes towards the end so that you can learn about that. And then we'll follow up in an email with some of those links so that you can get involved in our mission. So just to share with you a little bit about CORRAL, for those of you that are new to CORRAL, CORRAL is a 501c3 nonprofit founded in 2008 that supports adolescent girls who've been dealt a hard hand or a rough hand in life. Our girls neglected, abused, or suicidal at times have been referred to us by local partners such as Human Resources, Juvenile Justice Department, Police Department, school districts. And because we believe that every girl deserves a bright future, we provide the right amount of support of long-term holistic programming for these girls so that they can experience holistic academic support, equine therapy, mentorship, vocational training, college prep, family support, and all of these other resources that we provide to them. We make a lasting impact on every single one of the girls that come through our program. Our girls go from failing grades to A and B honor roll. And some of our juniors and seniors end up taking honors classes and AP courses, believe it or not. 75% of our girls who stay with us through their senior year end up matriculating into college. Isn't that amazing? So most importantly, what I wanted to share with you is 100% of our alumni girls use the skills that were taught to them in our programs as they become young adults in their everyday lives. So and you're probably asking, like, how are you guys funding this? How are you doing this great work? Well, we are funded by individual donors, by foundations, by trusts, and grantors. And you can see that specific breakdown if you were interested by going to our website, corralwriting.org, and looking at our annual report. So that's just a little bit about Currey, but I wanted to get into what you were here for, why you signed up, and what you're waiting for. So I want to introduce to some, and I want to present to others, our founder and executive director of Currey, Joy Currey, as she comes to the microphone.
Hey, thanks, Jennifer. It's certainly exciting to be having this conversation, 12 or 13 years later. Time's gotten away from me, but certainly I'm excited to answer all of your questions today. I just would like to start out and tell you a little bit about Currey's background and how I got this thing off the ground and where it's been over the last 12 or 13 years. And we can go from there. So my story is I was born and raised in North Carolina. I went to Chapel Hill. I got my undergraduate degree in business. And I went to teach through Teach for America in Philadelphia. And I taught in inner city schools there. And that was a really foundational experience for me and for how Currey came to be. At that school, I worked with kids that were 3 and 4 and 5 grade levels behind. And they were certainly struggling. And as I looked around at the support, the neighborhood, the school, the community, I thought, man, these kids just don't have any way out. And so when I entered Teach for America, I thought, goodness, education was the answer. And then I saw while I was teaching that, it was so much more than just the educational gap, but our kids had multiple factors and their communities had multiple factors stacked against them. And that, honestly, I left 2 years of teaching kind of unsure of what to do. To best serve the kids, but knew I felt called to serving that population and serving them would be part of the rest of my career. So I went on to teach at a charter school then in Brooklyn for 2 more years. And I was a founding teacher and the population was still very similar. 90% of our kids were free and reduced lunch. The majority of our kids were kids of color. Our kids came to me as 5th graders, low performing, 3, 4, 5 grade levels behind. And by the time they were 7th graders, they were some of the highest performing kids in New York City. And it wasn't because I had grown immensely as a math teacher during that time, but it was the school environment that we had built for these kids. And we gave them a tremendous amount of support and we held them to very high expectations. So it was high expectations combined with high support, and that together meant that we could create an environment where kids would succeed. So that experience gave me a lot of hope. It also gave me a lot of expertise to do what I'm doing now. And I think that's an important part as you think about, what it is that you're trying to do, do something that you're good at and that you know how to do. So I knew how to teach middle school kids. I knew how to teach, tough kids, but that was sort of my expertise. I also had a background in riding. I rode in college. I rode while I was teaching. I got my first horse actually as a teacher, which was maybe not the most fiscally responsible decision. I can assure you that Currey uses better financial judgment than I did as a 20-something-year-old. I kept riding, and that was also, having a horse while I was teaching was a refuge for me. And that's when I started to connect the two in my mind that, maybe if I had this outlet to go out to my horse after school, and that was so therapeutic for me, maybe my kids should have something like that too. So it was just an idea at that point. And happenstance would have it, I met my husband in New York, and he got a job in North Carolina, and which brought us back to North Carolina. And that was really an important part of Currey's story, because I came back to my community. I'm not sure that it was something I necessarily wanted at the time, but that's what God had in mind for me. And I think that's another important part of thinking about being an entrepreneur is, what are you networked in the community that you're trying to be in, or the market, if you will? For me, I didn't have any fundraising experience, but, I'd grown up there and, here in the triangle and knew who to call. And that was really important for CORRAL to get off the ground. So I started CORRAL with honestly, I'm going to say very little vision. And I have a founding board member on this call, and she might be able to tell you that as well. I didn't have a grand idea of what CORRAL is today. I knew I wanted to partner. I needed to pair girls in high risk situations with rescued horses. Like I knew that, but that's about all I knew. Initially, my idea was just like, let me give kids horses as an incentive to keep their grades up and stay out of trouble. And I learned very quickly with our first kid who was in Wake County Human Services that, she didn't need an incentive to keep her grades up and out of trouble. She needed a support. She needed a community. And so CORRAL very quickly became a holistic intervention, and a long-term holistic intervention where we would walk with kids through their middle and high school years. And it was very much through an iterative process that CORRAL has gotten where it is today. And I think that's probably another piece of entrepreneurship is, it takes a lot of reflection, self-reflection, reflecting with your team, for us, that happens quarterly, and then in a very robust way annually. What challenges did we see? What worked last year? What do we need to hold on to? And what do we need to get rid of? What really didn't work? And so that iterative process has been instrumental into how CORRAL has gotten where it is today. We have dreams to grow still. We've opened our second farm. We opened it right before the pandemic began. That's been a rough way to start a second farm. But nonetheless, it's off the ground, and it's growing. And we have plans to open a second and third farm in the Triangle over the next several years, over the next 10 years, and kind of use this planting model to grow the impact of what we're doing. Because for us, it's not really just about like numbers served and like we served this many kids this year and we're just going to keep growing the numbers we serve. It's really about having that long-term impact on our kids and walking with them all through their middle and high school years. So we have cohorts of kids of about 20 at each farm to keep a community and family feel to it. And that's what we're trying to replicate across each farm, is that each kid really sees CORRAL as their home away from home. And that's the thing that I hear from them so often, is that CORRAL is just that. And I think that's really what makes CORRAL special. That, yes, I think we've got a great intervention model, and that's been an iterative process. But it really is that it's the safe haven where kids can come and be themselves, learn who they are, take risks, and grow into the young people that God designed them to be. So that's kind of CORRAL in a nutshell, and kind of how I got it off the ground, if you will. There's so much more to the story. And one of our core values is community. And I think our community has been a key piece of that growth. And when I think about that, it's donors, it's volunteers, it's staff, it's board members. We've just had a tremendous group of people that has walked alongside us for a reason or for a season as we've grown. And it's been that team approach that has helped CORRAL grow as a nonprofit.
Wow. Thank you so much, Joy, for sharing your story about how you got started with CORRAL and kind of what motivated you to get this dream and this vision off the ground. We want to dive right into some of the questions that were sent in already. You guys had an opportunity, for those of you that signed up early, to send in questions, and I have about 6 of them that we're going to go through today. So I'll start off with the first question that was submitted. The question was, regarding the first steps in getting started, Joy, what are some of the legal things that should be done? Are there any inspections or any other things that need to be considered that before you really get the vision off the ground?
Yeah, so this can be a really daunting part of the process and can really be a bottleneck for folks. what we did is we knew an attorney that I had gone to college with, and we asked to go have coffee. And she said, hey, yeah, I bet my law firm can support what you all are doing pro bono. And they have been our pro bono attorneys ever since then. But, that was great. I do think even if you didn't have that, it's not as challenging as you might think to, file for incorporation. That's, the very first step. File for incorporation. If you want to become a nonprofit, then as the founder, you have to form a board and give up ownership, if you will, to the board, and then file your 501 status. And at least in North Carolina, it seems, really daunting and scary, but those documents are not too hard. There's a number of services online that can create those documents for you. And, at least in North Carolina, our local government is pretty liberal of starting small businesses and being willing to open small businesses. So that process of incorporation, I remember it was so exciting to become incorporated. And then, several months later to get our nonprofit status or that determination, and feeling like, oh my gosh, the world is open up to me. But I think honestly, I probably made too big of a deal out of that. And so that would be my advice to you is don't let all of those pieces stop you. And then, at every step of the way, you can get really bogged down in, what's the permit for this, or what's the copyright, or, I would say, don't let that stop you. My experience in working with any of these government entities is, they want us to be successful as small business owners, and certainly as a nonprofit community. And so they'll work with you to ensure that, you're filling out the form correctly, or, if you filled it out wrong the first time, that you get another shot at it. So I think people get awful wrapped around the axle about that piece of it. And I'd say just, hop down at your computer, pull up that 501 status, or, those articles of incorporation. If you're looking for standard articles, draw some up online. Once your board comes together, they'll refine those articles, they'll refine those bylaws to make it really work for your organization. But it shouldn't be something that, keeps you from moving, from getting that vision off the ground.
Awesome. Great answer. So another good question that we received, Joy, is what is it about your story that you think speaks most to the heart of people? So it's a two-part question. The second part of this question is, what have you found to be the best way or the best forum for you to be able to tell that story in public settings to really gain recognition?
Well, I ask myself actually regularly, like, why do people support CORRAL? So, I guess I don't have that much confidence in that arena. But what I do think happens is, folks see the need. They see the need, particularly with our vulnerable youth, and want to do something. And as I spoke about at the beginning of this call, the factors that are influencing our vulnerable youth are so multifaceted that you often feel like, well, what can I do? I can't change the school system. I can't change the juvenile justice system. I can't take away poverty. I can't, snap my fingers and make gang violence go away, or, child abuse, or these big sort of adverse childhood experiences that our kids are experiencing. So you feel like you don't have a way to do anything about that. And I think CORRAL gives all of us, myself included, really a tangible way to impact kids, one kid at a time. It's not, we're not changing the world overnight, but we tend to believe that if we're changing kids and we're really changing the trajectory that they're on, that they will then go out and change their community. They'll affect their future family. They'll affect their future children. They'll be able to hold a job and maybe not just hold a job, but prosper And so all of the cycle of trauma that we see in their lives as they're growing up cannot be a part of their adulthood or their child's future. So I think that's it, like I said, for all of us included, it gives us an opportunity to really change things, to change the trajectory. I think also, working with horses is attractive to a lot of folks. Anybody who's ever worked with horses knows the impact these incredible creatures can have on a person. They're just really fantastic partners and magical in a lot of ways. And so I think that's attractive, that it's such a unique way of reaching kids that many folks find interesting. So I think that's it in a nutshell.
Wonderful, wonderful. So here's one regarding the beginning, going back to the beginning. When CORRAL first launched as a nonprofit, how were you able to obtain funding? That's probably a question that a lot of people have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of ties back in the second half of your last question, which I'm realizing I didn't answer so well. It's this idea of telling the story. And man, I would get so frustrated in our early days of people saying, well, no one's going to fund you until you can tell stories. And I'm like, well, I have brand new children that are new to our program, and I can't just like run around and start telling their stories. And, I don't even know if this is going to work yet. So that was a very frustrating thing to me, to almost feel like I was objectifying the kids by telling their stories. But yet that's what everyone was telling me is to tell their stories. And so I found ways to tell about their stories without telling their stories. And so I often would use my own experiences in working with them, and the interactions that surprised me or more than surprised me, that impacted me deeply. And I really had to put myself out there on the line to kind of start telling my stories and be, vulnerable myself. And I was the kind of person when I first started this that I didn't wear my heart on my sleeve. I didn't wear my heart anywhere where you could see it. So being that open and vulnerable was really hard for me, but that was the way that I started storytelling. And ultimately storytelling has been an essential part of CORRAL's story. And now we're at the point where we have, young adults and alumni in their 20s that really are thriving. And now they want to start telling this story and their experiences with CORRAL and how that's impacted their future and the struggles that they've gone through. So, now 10 years later, I don't have to so much be the main storyteller or the center of attention. That was really hard on me because the mission and the girls themselves speak for themselves. But then I also would say, it's storytelling, but then it's also just being scrappy. And, writing every grant you can possibly find out there, talking to every single person you could possibly talk to. A main organization that's been really helpful for us in starting this is the Mission Triangle Foundation. Mission Triangle has been with us from the beginning, and they really taught me how to fundraise. And their primary philosophy is it's not about, dollars and cents and trying to get, Joe Schmo and his wife to give $50. It's about just invite people to be a part of your work alongside you, and they'll see the need and they'll give. Certainly you need to invite them to give. It's not that we're going to hide that under, hide it under the table, but that's what we've done. And so we started with monthly farm tours. And so I would just invite people out to the farm. I would tell them what we're doing. I would invite them to be a volunteer, whether they were qualified to volunteer or not. That was part of growing them as a champion. And so that concept that we call, or Mission Triangle calls, transformational giving, I think has been a really key piece of our fundraising experience, because it's been about bringing people in, not bringing dollars in.
Wow. Joy just said a mouthful when she said bring people in versus bringing dollars in. So I hope that speaks to many of you all out there that are looking to start a nonprofit. So Joy, someone had a question in which they said they're looking to serve kids between K through 12. And their question was, do they have to come during school hours due to liability issues? Or do you have to have your own insurance in order to cover the kids during those times? So what are the parameters with that?
We tried to partner with schools, with Wake County Public Schools at the very beginning, and they were certainly scared off by the liability of horses. We thought we had a thing and then realized we didn't. And so for us, it's actually been sort of nice to work outside the system and have that freedom. So our program is after school and weekends. And so, we're coordinating with schools and teachers every single day to support kids. We're coordinating with their court counselors and their therapists and whatnot, but we are not necessarily beholden to what Wake County's public schools or any other school system requires. And that gives us the freedom to really serve kids how we see it's best. Insurance is a doozy. But again, that was one of those things that freaked me out a whole lot at the beginning. And, I remember our very first large donation went to pay for our insurance policy. But I was surprised, that was in the ballpark of, $1,000 to $2,000 for a general liability policy. I was expecting something so much bigger and so much worse. Of course, we've had to buy more policies since then. I wish we still paid $2,000 for insurance, but it's been incremental, so, we, speaking like very bluntly, there's not really that many businesses that are quite as risky as ours. We work with horses, we work with at-risk teenage girls, and, there are plenty of providers out there willing to underwrite what we do and do so at a reasonable cost. So yes, it's probably going to be your first big expense getting off the ground, but don't let that scare you. And your insurance agent will also be a tremendous resource. They really have helped me along the way, kind of identify what our risks are, and what kind of coverage do we need and what kind of coverage do we don't need, and that's helped keep the cost down.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Joy. This question, I think, is a crucial question. So we're excited for you to answer this, Joy. It's the question is, what are some of the ways to stay committed to achieving your goals of starting your business, starting your nonprofit? But the key is without burning yourself out and without burning out the people that have decided to walk alongside you.
I'm still learning that. And I've made a lot of missteps in that regard. Part of being a founder is that you have unlimited energy towards what you're doing. Certainly I have a lot of people that, Jennifer, Janvika, Maya, that are on my team that also seem to have unlimited energy and passion for our cause. But, to expect, especially in the startup days, to expect people to have that level of drive that you do, that's one place I went wrong. And I did burn out people in the early days. This was before I had kids. And so I was easily working most days, 15-hour days, to get CORRAL off the ground. I think some of the best advice I've gotten, because, now I don't work 15 hours a day, but I still do work a lot. But now I also have, 2 kids and I'm homeschooling. So I think in some ways I look back to those early days of working those long hours and think I would give anything to have that amount of responsibility. Because, now too, at this point, it's like, I'm not just trying to get something started up. I'm actually responsible for keeping it going. And so, I would say, like, yes, it's really long hours in the beginning, and you should just expect that. But there's a certain amount of freedom in that you're working really hard and it can fail, and that's not the end of the world. And I know that sounds like devastating to think about, like, no, I'm trying to get this idea off the ground. Don't tell me it can fail. But, that's part, if you're willing to like take that risk and, burn the candle at both ends, to get it off the ground, that's some of the most freeing times of your kind of trajectory. I think this is an important time to talk about, kind of what assets you need to start up. And this is a bit of a difficult conversation because I talked about the asset of community. I also had the ability to, go without a salary for a while. And, that was a privilege. My husband was in grad school. We did some, again, I'm telling you way too much about my personal finances here, but, we leveraged that time of him being on scholarship and in grad school for me to start a nonprofit, and we were young. But it's important to note that I'm I have to name white privilege in this conversation, because I was able to do that because of my my socioeconomic status, the fact that I was coming back to my community. Some of you know that I started CORRAL on my family's farm. So that was, an asset that I had in front of me. And so, we talk a lot about in the nonprofit sector how, leaders of nonprofits are disproportionately white for the populations that we're trying to serve. And, the white privilege plays a part in that. So I just have to name my privilege that, it wasn't that I'm like amazing, that I worked a whole bunch of long hours and, took these financial risks. I was able to because I had privilege. And so that's an important piece to just call out and name. I guess then the question is like, all right, so you're naming like all these really miserable pieces of this. Like you're going to not have a salary for a long time. You're going to work ridiculous amounts of hours. You're going to leverage student loans. Like what other ridiculousness do I need to start a nonprofit? And that is really exhausting. And I did have times where I felt really burnt out. And in fact, I think in some ways that's a daily struggle. But, my pastor gave me some really great advice 5, 6, 7 years into it and said, look, God hasn't called you to this for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, even 7 years. God's called you to this hopefully for 40 years, or at least until he calls you out of it. So, it's your responsibility to keep yourself healthy and well and in the game, so that you can do this mission as long as you're being called to do it. And so I was grateful that my board gave me the opportunity to go on a sabbatical, and that was 7 years into it. And that allowed me to see rest really differently. Again, at that point, I also had a young family. And so I was like a working mom, and I had all that mommy guilt too of not spending enough time with my children. So we've come up with ways that, once a quarter, we get away as a family for a shorter period of time. Once a year, we get away as a family for a longer period of time. That family time is really rejuvenating for me, because I don't have to have several roles. I'm just a mom. And then the other thing that I do is Sundays are truly Sabbath. They're sacred. I'm like, I don't even pick up my phone on Sundays. And so if I don't have that Sunday, I do work 6 days a week typically, but if I don't have that Sunday, I will be a miserable person the following week. So really, I heard a sermon recently that, one of the commandments is to take rest. It's up there with like, do not murder. And so, these are things that God has commanded us to do because he understands that we need rest. So, you know, my family and I say we Sabbath hard on Sunday. So call out those times and don't try to make that your cleaning day, or, you know, whether it's Sunday or whatnot. Like, it's, you know, if getting your house in order is restful for you, by all means do it. But, you know, really carve out times where you can do the things that you love with the people that you love, when you're not having to wear that role of, you know, entrepreneur, CEO, executive director. That's essential.
Wow, Joy, thank you so much. I believe you've given so many crucial pieces of information that are absolutely necessities for brand new entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders. The last question that we have is also a really important one. It is, what are the 3 most important things that you think should be considered when starting a nonprofit?
I think the number one thing is kind of a little bit of what I hit on at the beginning, which is do something you're good at. I hear people that say, like, I have this vision, but I don't have a clue how to do it. And those folks are rarely able to get that vision off the ground. You know, there absolutely are lots of people on my team that have skill sets that I don't have, and they bring that to the tables. And that's where the teamwork takes place. But our core competencies are something that I was good at. So make sure that whatever you're starting is something you really know how to do well. Having that expertise will be essential along the way. It will make you a much better leader of the organization. So yeah, you know, whatever it is that you know how to do, that should be a big piece of your vision. The other is probably that there's this glamorous idea of, you know, I have this vision and I have all these pieces in place and I see it. And that wasn't my experience. I know other people have that experience of, you know, this grand vision, and they know exactly how it's going to be and exactly how it's going to look. But it's okay if you don't have that. For me, it was just more of a calling, and I had some expertise in the area and some, you know, resources. And so it was like, all right, let me put my resources, my skills together, this calling, and let's just try something. And so God has given me the vision kind of a little bit at a time. And it's maybe that's because he knows that's all I can handle. But that's what I needed. So don't feel like you have to know everything. You know, I still have a picture of our first, or in a folder in my office, I have like our first business plan and our first budget. And, you know, I probably read it once a quarter, and it makes me laugh. But the cool thing is it's not that far off from what we're doing now. Like the core idea was there, and the driving force behind it. And so that would probably be my third advice, is like, what's the why behind what you do? Be really transparent with that. And that's true for profit or nonprofit. You know, Simon Sinek talks about starting with the why. And I had a really hard time articulating my why. And I had a hard time being transparent about my why. For me, you know, as I spoke about, I was working in schools where kids were struggling. A disproportionate, most of those kids were kids of color. I understood the way that systemic racism played out in our schools. I wanted to do something about that. But I didn't feel necessarily at liberty to talk about that clearly as my why until much later. And now that I am able to articulate it much more clearly, that our vision is to give every kid access to a bright future, you know, there's a lot more traction, and I'm able to involve people in a lot more ways and allow them to kind of take the idea and run in whatever direction their expertise is in, because I'm able to articulate to everyone why we're doing that. So more so than a great business plan or a great vision or a lot of clarity, make sure that you have that why down pat.
Wow. Well, that concludes this segment of our time together. Thank you, Joy, for sharing all of those wonderful nuggets. What we would love to do at this point is shift just a little bit so that everyone that's in the room actually has an opportunity to ask questions from the floor. So I'll go ahead and set the parameters for this time. We want you to use the raise your hand emoji in the Zoom room. It's at the bottom of the toolbar called reactions. And once you do that, we'll call your name and you can take yourself off of mute and ask your question. And Joy will answer that question to the best of her ability. So we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes in this segment of our time together. And so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to change my view so I can see everyone. And Janvika is going to come off of mute and again, kind of support this as well. So between Janvika and myself, we'll catch your questions. I do want to mention as well, if you're having any difficulty asking a question or raising your hand, you can go ahead and put that question in the chat and we'll catch it from there as well. Or you can just put your name in the chat and we'll call on you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start with Sean. Sean, go ahead and take yourself off of mute and ask your question.
Hi there. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Joy, and thank you everyone else for putting on this presentation. It's been very insightful. A lot of really good information packed into a short period of time. Joy, I guess my question, so I'm a big fan of approaching even your job in an entrepreneurial fashion. And in my current role, I'm an accountant. And in my current role in the team that they're trying to build, we're being encouraged to actually take on initiative and things like that. But I guess what I wanted to say is I'm concerned sometimes that my motives are questioned, and I kind of might have gotten that a little bit from your share when you related to your experience with your feelings on privilege. I guess my question is, how do you express your servant motivations of being pure of intent, without necessarily being, and you were very humble. So when I say that, without being preachy, and how do you maintain your humility in the light of your privilege? I guess that would be my question.
Yeah, that's tough. So I think, no, that's all right. So, it's, as a leader, it's always like, a fine balance between, being confident and being humble. And, your team needs confidence, but your team also needs you to listen. And so I think, one of the things I try to do on that, the preachy bit on it, I guess I just try to live it out, I'm going to live out my values. I'm going to live out my care for the young women we serve. I'm going to demonstrate it in how hard I work and how relentless I am in pursuing their bright future alongside them. And, if people just kind of see how I'm working, then they'll see, ideally, that, my motives are as pure as a human's can be. Maybe not as pure as a human's can be, but, I think we're still going because I am trying to seek what the Lord has for me here, not necessarily what I want. But you know, there will be people that question that. And there will be people that think you're the worst. Particularly if there are women on this call, that's, you know, there's a challenge of starting things as a woman, where people often don't see you for who you are. And so to those folks, you know, you can listen to them. It's really important to listen to them. But that's different from letting them stop you from moving forward. I think one of the things that's been really interesting to me is like some of the people that have come hardest against me. It was very threatening at the time. And now I look back at some of like other mistakes I've made or things I wish I've done differently. And I'm like, oh, that was the point they were trying to make. I do wish they'd said it differently, but now I totally get the point. So, you know, even the people that come hardest against you have a lot of validity, you know, in what they're trying to point out in you or in the organization that you're growing. You know, the organization you grow will have, you know, all the same sort of faults that the founder has. And that's really icky and weird to see that, you know, it's kind of like a manifestation of both your goodness and your brokenness. And it gets on display for everyone to see. And, you know, that's where you just get to go, well, this is where God's working in my life in this way. And I'm not perfect, but perhaps if we all work together, we can, you know, keep pushing this mission forward despite my imperfections.
Thank you. That's awesome. No, I like it. Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with what the other message that you got by saying that the people who are coming into your life, there's probably a reason and there's a message. You might not like the delivery of the message. I like to say to colleagues a lot of times is, you know, people like to just throw you to the wolves. And it's like, why does it have to be that hard? It really doesn't, you know, and we could be a lot more efficient if we can model our message a little bit. So yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you.
Another great resource on that we have used is the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. There's a book by Gino Wickman called Traction, and also another book that Gino Wickman writes called How to Be a Great Boss, I think is what it's called. And the Entrepreneurial Operating System was a big game changer for me as a leader, because it gave me a formula on how to lead and how to involve people and how to get folks involved in my vision and mission. And that's been a real game changer for me because I don't know that came naturally for me. So having that formula has helped us all a whole lot.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Joey. And thanks, Sean, for asking that. So next we have Will, if you want to take yourself off mute, and we'll have Lauren who has a question after. So go ahead, Will.
Hey, Joey, how you doing? This is awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time to share this basic foundational insight. It's, you know, I'm a fan of CORRAL. I love CORRAL, love the horses, just love the people there. Such a nice spirit of a environment of just a belief among all your people. And then my question segues off of that. I want you, if you will, just take a few seconds and give us a little more on that transformational giving, because that people versus finance thing is such a powerful tool on how you invest in the people and not the money. I wanted to ask you also is, as you come into a visionary status, you know, from an entrepreneur's mindset, when do you know it's time to let go and empower other people to do things without you having to be there doing everything? And the third thing was the cultural challenges. How did you overcome those as far as like you're in Currey, affluent area, you know, I'm going to be a little graphic, the great white savior coming into the urban community to save our poor little kids, you know, just how did you deal with that type of, if there was any pushback or any type of opposition regarding that?
Yeah. Okay. 3 great questions. So Janvika, I hope you got them all so I can answer them all. So I'll start with the white savior one. That's one that doesn't necessarily go away, but I think that also is the piece that comes down with expertise. I didn't just say, hey, I want to, walk into this community and save these kids. It was, hey, I have a lot of experience helping kids get on grade level. And I have a lot of experience living in community with kids of color, not necessarily the exact kids that I'm serving today. And so I'm going to, use the tools that I learned from working with them and living in their community, to code switch. I mean, because there is some amount of code switching that happens in a founder's role, because you're going, from one meeting that's, with the grantor, another meeting that's with the government, and then a third meeting with the parents, and then the fourth with the kid. So you have to be able to kind of talk in all of those ways. And that's where being an expert is. I think the other piece about the white savior piece is, if I'm, our organization is, from a volunteer standpoint, disproportionately white for the kids we serve. And that's an area we're trying to address. We really want to make sure the kids see people that look like them in the organization. I'm grateful that happens at the staff level, and also the leadership level. Our leadership team is majority people of color. And so for me, I have a lot of people around me that are speaking into my life and can that we have the kind of relationship and rapport that they can say, that is your privilege, Joy. You grew up on a farm in that pretty big house, and, that's your privilege speaking. And then, at other times, we can see eye to eye on items. So I think that's the beauty in diversity. You hear this often, but that diversity is actually something that enhances a team. And it absolutely is, because everybody has a different perspective, and you have to bring that to the table, particularly when you're trying to help people, because oftentimes the person you're trying to help has a very different perspective than you do. So that's that question.
Joy,
yeah,
I was going to say, let's answer, I want to honor Lauren's question as well, and then we'll get Will's 2 other questions answered and send them out so we can honor everyone else's questions too.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Okay. All right, Lauren, what's up?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the flexibility, and thank you, Will, for letting me kind of jump in here, and also for a really great, this has been so informative. So my question comes from actually my personal experience with CORRAL. I volunteered years and years and years ago. And one of the things that I've found about CORRAL, and I'm interested if this was something that was intentional or if this is just a skill that CORRAL has, is that CORRAL engages with the community and then is able to continue to re-engage these same people. And I think that is definitely it's more difficult to do a second and third and fourth time around. And I don't even live in North Carolina anymore, and I'm still re-engaging with CORRAL. So I am really interested if that was something that was built into the vision, or if that was something that was sort of created along the way.
That's very intentional, and that's something we learned from transformational giving. For me, I'm looking at people who are giving money, time towards, a vision that I have. And that at the beginning and continues to feel very personal, that I want to properly show gratitude and then be able to engage them in how that time, talent, or treasure has impacted the organization, the cause, the girls, the horses. Because I don't want it to be transactional. I want them to really know that, that dollar went somewhere and it mattered, even if it was $1 or $10. And so we put a lot of work and effort on personal touch points with donors and volunteers to make sure they know that we see them as humans, not human ATMs. Jennifer, who you met on this call, that's a big part of her role, is connecting our donors and volunteers as people to the work that we're doing. And to that end, we call the people that are donors and our volunteers champions. We don't really differentiate between, are you a donor, are you a champion, are you a big donor, are you a little donor? Like, everybody's just a champion. And we work really hard to communicate how that investment, we really do think of it as investment of time, talent, and treasure, is changing the lives of the young people we serve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. I think we have time for one more question and then we'll close out. And again, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, you can email me, and I already have a stockpile of questions that we didn't have time for. So you can expect that. But would anyone like the last question before we close out? Sean, okay, go for it.
Sorry, I believe you asked, and I'm not sure if this was one of the ones that you might address later, but with the gentleman who asked about delegation, I was just curious as to, and maybe you answered it. If you did, I apologize. Relying on delegation within and outside of your team. I'd be curious your take on that. And that might be answered, I'm guessing, within the EOS book and things like that you referenced. So thank you.
There's a lot of great stuff in the EOS book about delegate and elevate is what they call it. But it also ties into this concept of champions and transformational giving. If I'm not involving other people in the work, they also don't get to see God's glory in how this work unfolds. And so in some ways, it's kind of like a responsibility to involve other people in this mission because God's called me to it and God's called them to it. And if I'm hoarding it all to myself to do, that's kind of like selfish. That said, I like things done well. And, I in some ways, I like things a certain way. My team will tell you that can be frustrating at times. But that comes down to teaching. And, there's certain things that I'm like, I'm close-handed, like this is how we do it. And I'm going to teach you how to do it and you can do it too. And then there's some things that are open-handed and it's like, look, you're way better at this than I am. And this kind of goes back to the why, our why, kind of the basics things that I've taught you that are important to me. Now go run with it however you want, because you're going to do it so much better than I will. And I think the other piece of that is you have to be okay with people failing. That's frustrating because ultimately as the founder or, CEO, like you're responsible for cleaning up that mess. And that can be really frustrating at times. But nobody learns if they don't have a chance to take risks and fail. And we talk about it at CORRAL as failing forward. Because that's so important for our girls. They need to know that they can take risks and fail. So if we're not doing that as an adult and modeling it, then we're not teaching them that skill. So you just know the things that can't fail, and you're like, all right, I'm not letting go of that. But outside of that, everything else is open-handed.
Wow. What an awesome power hour we have had. We're trying to respect your time and keep it within this 1 hour time frame. So we apologize for any questions that we were unable to answer today. As Janvika shared with you earlier, you can still submit questions to her in time for her to get it into the document that she will send out in the follow-up email. So we really hope that this space has been helpful for you, that it's been informative, and most importantly, that it's been inspiring to you. So look for that email in the next coming weeks after we've given Joy an opportunity to answer some of your questions. And I'd like to take a quick moment to invite you to connect with CORRAL after today's workshop. You have a couple different ways to connect with us. We've got some exciting things coming up on our farm. Every month on the second Saturday of each month from 9:30 to 12, we conduct a Volunteer 101. It's a volunteer orientation opportunity. So if you say, yes, I'm an entrepreneur, but I still want to volunteer in my personal time, and you think that Corral's mission is in alignment with your passion, feel free to join us. You can go to corralriding.org and go to the events page and get an opportunity to sign up there. Just by way of quick announcement, we have yoga on the farm coming at Currey on April 30th from 9 to 12. And we're excited because I believe one of our yoga instructors is even on here today. She put in the comments that she's launching her yoga program, and she's going to be one of our instructors today. So on April 30th. So keep your eyes peeled for that information as well. So if you really found that this information was not only inspiring and helpful, and you'd like to consider a donation for Corral, I would love to invite you to join us in that cause. Just to kind of break it down for you, $20, as little as $20 can help provide nutritional lunches for our girls on Saturdays. You may not have all the details about our program, but our girls are with us from 9 to 5 on Saturdays. And so we're able to provide them with nutritional lunches with your gift of $20. If you were able to give $40, that would provide one vocational training session to a girl. And if you were able to give $200, that would provide equine assisted psychotherapy sessions for a girl for 1 week. So as you can see, no matter how much you're able to connect with Corral, when it comes to your treasure, whether it's 20, 40, or 200, you heard Joy say earlier, we don't have big givers, we don't have little givers, we have champions. And if we'd like to invite you to be a part of that champion, and to become a champion of Corral. We just recently, by way of announcement, we've just recently added 6 new girls to the Writing Academy who are in middle school. So your donation will definitely help kickstart this program and keep that journey going so that those girls can experience a bright future. And the last announcement that I have is I want you to save the date. So if you have a pen, if you have your phone, if you have your calendar, I want you to mark this down. May 20th, it's a Friday, May 20th. I want you to mark down this calendar date and save it, because we're inviting our alumni to come back and share their stories. We talked a lot about stories today. We want these girls to share their stories about how Corral has impacted their lives and how they are doing now as they are young adults. This will be a live streamed event, and the last time that we had an opportunity to share stories in a live event, it was a powerful and inspiring space for all those that watched and all those that were present. So we really want you to be a part of that space. So that event is called Grow and Bloom Gala, and we want you to be a part of it. So I just wanted to put that out for you to go ahead and mark the calendar and save the date. Listen, we're so grateful that you have been a part of this space today. Thank you for taking an hour out of your day to join with Corral and with Joy. We really hope that this has been a blessing to you. Thank you again for joining us. Peace and blessings to each of you. And we hope to see you on the farm really soon. God bless each one of you. Thank you again for joining this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.